The following content is for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
So recently I heard someone say that every single one of us makes mistakes and not one of us has lived a perfect life. And a lot of us have probably broken the law at some point and haven't been caught. I mean, I've definitely gone over the speed limit and haven't been pulled over before. But I think that's a little bit different than what this person is referencing. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I'm Jared Mola. I appreciate you joining me today on this episode of Inside the Mind. So what we do on this podcast is we take a deep dive into these true crime cases, and we focus on analyzing the behavioral patterns and thought patterns behind the ones committing these crimes. As we go through the details of these cases, hopefully we can make some sense of the why, even though that sounds ridiculous because how can you make sense of these stories? But we have a lot of questions that need answers. If you are a returning listener, thank you for tuning in once again. I really do appreciate your listenership. And if you're new here, thank you for checking out the podcast and please consider subscribing. So we have a different kind of episode today. We are not discussing a case involving murder or assault or any type of physical violence that we see in the cases we've talked about on the show. But the story that we are diving into today is certainly not absent of ill intent and behavior that was absolutely aimed at generating fear and angering and shaming those who are involved. And I wanted to wait to do this episode because, to tell you the truth, I did not have the story on my radar. I knew nothing about this case until a number of people were asking me about what I thought, and obviously that led me to check it out. And I am, of course, talking about the recently released Netflix documentary, which took the #1 spot for stream movies on Netflix, and that is Unknown Number, The High School Catfish. If you haven't watched this documentary yet, I'm giving you a spoiler alert right now because I'm going to be discussing details of the story that reveal the biggest question in this documentary, and that's who is behind this catfishing. So go watch it if you haven't and come back here for the breakdown, or stay here with me because we're going to go through the key takeaways. This story unpacks a real-life cyberbullying case that shook the small town of Beale City, Michigan, which this takes place out of. Now, cyberbullying is definitely a key part of this documentary, but really what this documentary is centered around is how sick and ill-intentional the mother was, considering what she did to her own daughter. I mean, that's the real shock factor in all of this, because had it not been for what she did and how she went about it, we would just be left with a disturbing cyberbullying case. And it's not to take away any severity from those cases, but considering again that this was her own mom behind all of this just makes it that much more shocking. But I highly recommend checking out this documentary just to see how everything develops in the storyline. It's really shocking. So before we get into all of it, let me give you the breakdown of this documentary. Unknown Number, The High School Catfish explores the disturbing case of a high school couple who were cyberstalked for nearly 2 years. The documentary follows the real story of Lauryn Licari and Owen McKinney. The high school couple were cyberstalked and bullied by an unknown aggressor until the FBI uncovered the shocking identity of the perpetrator. In the small town of Beale City, Michigan, Lauryn Licari and Owen McKinney were called the Golden Couple. Together since junior high, they entered high school closer than ever. Out of nowhere, a group text was sent to both Licari and McKinney from an unknown number claiming he was cheating on her. They found it odd, but dismissed it. A year later, the text returned at an alarming rate, up to 40 to 50 a day. The messages, as shown in the documentary, threatened Licari and made sexual explicit advances towards McKinney. Because the sender used an app that kept regenerating new phone numbers, Licari and McKinney were unable to block them. This also prevented law enforcement from tracing the texts. After nearly 2 years of harassment, the FBI finally cracked the case, and the sender's identity was revealed in a twist that shocked the entire town. The documentary retraces the steps of the case, and we now see where Licari and McKinney are now. So getting into the story, Lauryn and Owen became very close with each other, and they started dating when they were 13 years old, and both of them were very involved in sports. Lauryn played baseball, basketball, she ran cross country, and Owen played basketball and baseball as well, and then became more involved with football. And the way their relationship was portrayed in the documentary seemed very innocent. They just seemed like really good friends that became close and started dating. Both of their parents also became very close, particularly their moms, Kendra and Jill, who are in this documentary. They would often get together, do cookouts, parties, and just kind of hang out. The way they portray the kids in the documentary is that Owen has the bigger friend group. He has a little bit more popularity than Lauryn. Lauryn kind of is on the quieter side and has a smaller friend group and just kind of keeps to herself. They are seen at the school as the golden couple, and they end up going into their freshman year together. Now, again, Beale City is a super small town in Michigan. We're talking around 300 people in the entire city, so extremely small town. And the school they go to goes from 6th grade all the way through high school. So everybody certainly knows everybody because they all grew up with each other. So everything seemed like the picture-perfect life for these two until things took a massive turn. One of Owen's closest friends, Khloe, who was featured in the documentary, well, her and her parents are throwing this Halloween party, and Lauryn is under the impression that Khloe doesn't really like her and was known to not be the nicest girl at school, so she didn't really feel like going to this party, but Owen convinces her to go. Well, 2 weeks before the party, Lauryn and Owen get this text from an unknown number sent in a group text with him and Lauryn. And these texts are horrible, nasty stuff in these texts. So these texts completely throw off Lauryn and Owen, and they immediately try to figure out who is sending this. So Owen reaches out to Khloe and is like, hey, do you know who sent this? Did you send this? He's just kind of asking around, and Khloe claims she has no idea. So they go to the Halloween party, and the messages did stop, and things kind of settle down and return to normal after a while. So at this point, Lauryn and Owen are getting ready for the new school year coming up, and they're excited. But then after almost a year, the messages come back. And over the course of 22 months, they get thousands of texts daily. We're talking like 40 to 50 a day, all day long. I mean, it was just relentless. And when I tell you that these text messages are so horrific, they are so bad. First of all, these texts were sexual in nature towards Owen. I mean, talking about stuff that I cannot even repeat on here. But they say the exact text in the documentary. The texts towards Lauryn were so degrading and demeaning to her, stuff like attacking her eating disorders, saying she's the ugliest person they've ever seen, body shaming her. There were also texts telling her to hurt herself, telling her to take her own life. I mean, just awful stuff. And the sexual nature of the text towards not only Owen, but Lauryn too, is important when we get to who the perpetrator is, because the magnitude of these are so disgusting. Now, naturally, the kids at school are trying to figure out who is sending these texts, and a key takeaway from these texts are the way the sender is referencing specific details. One of those being the sender referring to Lauryn by her nickname Lo, which is a nickname that only close friends and family knew to call her. There were also references to specific clothes Lauryn wore along with her hairstyle. So it led them to believe that somebody at school was sending these texts because they were coming in real time, like during school hours. I mentioned earlier that these texts were coming in nonstop, and this started to really weigh heavy on both Owen and Lauryn, mostly because the texts were aimed around tearing apart their relationship and driving a wedge between them. So much so that they even considered breaking up in an effort to see if the text would stop, since that's what seemed like what this perpetrator desperately wanted. Now, looking at this from the perspective of a 13-year-old gives you some insight on just how much this weighed on them emotionally and mentally, because at 13 years old, you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to knock down any insecurities you may be battling with, and to have these texts coming in non-stop, constantly attacking your looks, your body, your confidence, it's damaging. It's extremely damaging, and the emotional and mental damage that was done to these kids is sickening. The worst part about this is that despite Owen and Lauryn ignoring these texts and leaving the sender on red and blocking the number, the perpetrator was using a number regenerator app. So it keeps regenerating a different number every single time. So they would get more texts from a different number, and this just added to the mental and emotional toll it took on them, because no matter what they did, it seemed like they could not escape this relentless harassment. I mean, that's what it is, just harassment. We now fast forward to December 2021. Owen and Lauryn reached a boiling point with this harassment and expressed to their parents how much this was really getting to them. So now this prompted Owen's mom, Jill, and Lauryn's mom, Kendra, to bring this issue to the principal and the school superintendent, who are also a part of this documentary. And Kendra brings pages and pages of all these text messages and is hard pressed on finding out who is behind this, as any parent should. I mean, if my kid approached me about this going on with them, I'd be determined to find out who was behind all of this as quickly as possible. Upon reviewing the hundreds of text messages, both the principal and the superintendent are extremely blown away by how vulgar these texts are and disgusting they are. They mentioned saying they have never seen anything like this, like not even close. So they obviously immediately start to look into this, and they start to look at potential culprits for this type of behavior and consider all possibilities, including Lauryn possibly sending herself these texts to possibly seek some type of attention as the victim. But after interviewing her and Owen, they don't find anything that would suggest they are behind this. They clear Lauryn, they clear Owen, and they start to bring in close friends to the couple. And there were some friends that they suspected might have been behind this. There was a cousin at one point that they might have suspected due to some of them not getting along with each other. But they end up not finding anything to suggest any of them are behind this. They even start to utilize the cameras in the school to see if anyone is suspiciously on their phone while these texts are coming in, and they don't end up finding anything suspicious or out of the ordinary. So with the texts not stopping and the weight of this just being overbearing for Owen and Lauryn, they end up breaking up just before Christmas break, which is so sad because they seemed so happy together before all of this started. And they honestly were together for a long time for their age. I mean, when I was in middle school and high school, people did not date for that long. And, they dated and there were relationships, but nothing really lasted that long. So it seemed like a big deal for them to be together for a long time. I mean, they were the golden couple. People looked at them as relationship goals. So with them breaking up, you would think these texts would stop because that's what the perpetrator wanted so badly for them to break up, right? But the text didn't stop. If anything, they ramped up even more. And Owen is texting back, expressing how much this is affecting him. And to make this situation even sicker than it already is every time Owen expresses any type of validating feeling to this person, they capture it, they screenshot it, and they send it to Lauryn. And they intentionally do this to kick her while she's down and remind her that she's not the one in control. And if it's one thing I want you to remember when we finally reveal who this person is behind this harassment, it's the calculated ill intent that they have when sending these messages. So some time passes and Owen starts to talk to some other girls, and he ends up dating this girl from another city. Well, this cyberstalker finds this girl, tracks her down on social media, and starts sending her harassing texts. Like, my goodness, this is insane. So you are so committed to harassing Owen and Lauryn and getting to them so personally that you're now bringing in people that you don't even know. You don't even know this girl. She's from a completely other city. And your level of ill intent to get to these kids, you're now going to bring in an innocent person and start harassing them. It's absolutely infuriating. So 15 months into all of this, the parents finally get the police involved because these texts are becoming more severe in nature, repeatedly telling Lauryn to kill herself and she should just die. One text said, "You should finish yourself or we will." So they turn to the police, and this is where Sheriff Mike Main in the documentary comes into the case, and he sits down with both sets of the parents, the school principal, the school superintendent, And they express that this cyberbullying and harassment has been going on for over a year now. And they are deeply concerned with the mental health statuses of Lauryn and Owen and how this is affecting their academics, their sports. And they're just begging for help because they are fearing that the emotional trauma from this situation might get to a point where they can no longer bear that anymore. And the risk for self-harm is exponential at that point. So the sheriff goes straight to interviewing the close friend group of these two because of the personal nature of the messages. It has to be somebody close to them. Remember, they're referencing to Lauryn as Lo, her nickname. They know a lot of personal information. So Lauryn played basketball for Beale City, and there was a game where she scored 0 points, and she gets a text taunting her about that. And I'm watching this at this point, and I'm like, wow, this person is stalking these kids in a very creepy, stealthy way. So Jill talks to Kendra and is like, hey, you know the girls on the basketball team. You know them way better than I do. Who competes with Lauryn? Can it possibly be someone on the team sending these texts? Well, Lauryn ends up getting another text. And this text is talking about how many points this person scored in the game the other night. And Kendra, Lauryn's mom, was a volunteer scorekeeper for the basketball team. So Lauryn asks her to look back on the score sheets. And when they look back through them, they only find one person that had that many points that night. Khloe Wilson. That was the girl that threw the Halloween party. So at this point in the documentary, we start finding out more about Khloe and how she had a crush on Owen, and according to Lauryn, would go up and talk to Owen just to make her jealous. Her and Lauryn didn't really like each other. You could tell. They didn't really get along. Owen even mentions Khloe not being the nicest person growing up. So they start to look into her being jealous of Lauryn as a potential motive. So they bring her in for an interview and they ask her, what's going on? What's your story? And she denies everything. And she says she's not involved at all. Two other girls that are close friends with Khloe and Owen, Macy and Sophie, were interviewed by the sheriff, and nothing suspicious on their part was found either. So at this point, Kendra and Jill are extremely frustrated with nothing turning up in these interviews. So they come up with this idea to talk to the basketball team and confront them about what's going on. And the school superintendent is like, no way. That's not going to happen. That is not going to go the way you think it's going to go. And it definitely seemed like Jill was zeroing in on Khloe just because of the past problems with her and Lauryn. And Khloe ends up getting a text from Owen saying, you need to confess to all of this. This is ridiculous. This needs to stop. But she later gets a text from Owen saying, hey, I'm really sorry about that. That was my mom. So Jill was texting Khloe from Owen's phone trying to get her to confess. Clearly, Jill felt that most of the evidence that they had was pointing to Khloe being the one behind this. One of those pieces of information being the 12 points being scored when Khloe had 12 points that particular game on the night that one text came in. Now, Owen and Lauryn start getting texts from area codes in Florida at the same time that Khloe and her family take a trip to the Florida area. So when those messages are coming in with those area codes, it leads Jill and Sheriff Maine to believe, okay, this is pointing back to her being a potential person of interest here. Khloe is adamant that it is not her sending these texts, and she is continuously trying to convince everyone that she's not involved. So between the sheriff putting pressure on her and her parents grilling her and kids at school suspecting it's her, she finally reaches her boiling point, and her dad suggests handing over her phone for a forensic extraction, and she agrees to this. So they do the extraction, and there was not a single thing on her phone that suggested she was sending these texts. But the sender continues to send Owen and Lauryn texts, almost pretending to be Khloe at this point, because they are talking about how they got their phone searched and nothing was found. And then they send a picture of Khloe and Owen together. And this is where everyone, including me, is like, this is not Khloe. She's referencing herself too much for it to be her. And the police at this point dismissed the idea that Khloe is the one sending these texts. And they go back to the log of texts, trying to look for something that can give them some progress on this perpetrator. Well, they come across this picture that was sent. And it was a picture of a sweatshirt and a phone case. And this sends an alarm bell off for Jill because it was taken at their Christmas party. And the only person that could have taken that picture had to be at the party. So she goes on to say that only family was at the party. So the sheriff starts to look into somebody who could have been at the party, but also is in Owen's class. The only family member that was in Owen's class was his cousin, Adrianna. So Khloe, Sophie, and Macy, super close friends, and they immediately jump on this idea that Adrianna can potentially be the one behind all of this because they are claiming that Adrianna doesn't like them. And Sophie goes on to say in the documentary that she can't think of anyone else besides Adrianna that would dislike their friend group so much to make it sound like they're bullying somebody else. How is Owen's cousin, Adrianna, connected to all this? Well, she played volleyball with Khloe, Sophie, and Macy, and she was claiming that they had, their friend group, and if you weren't in their, circle of friends, they would have the mean girl energy. And Khloe's parents get interviewed by the sheriff, and they claim that none of this is true, these claims. So they start to really double down on pointing the finger towards Adrianna, trying to frame Khloe as the perpetrator because of the way she had been treating Adrianna. The sheriff finally interviews Adrianna, and she gets questioned about if she has any information about this harassment. Does she have any involvement? He asks about the picture, and Adrianna expresses how accusatory he's being, and she's completely thrown off because she's trying to keep to herself, go to school. She hasn't done any wrong to anybody, and instead of being interviewed and asked, she feels she's more so being coerced into admitting that she's behind this. Let me tell you something. I have a bone to pick with the sheriff, okay? First of all, I understand that there is an overwhelming amount of texts that you have to go through. I understand that you are desperately wanting to find out who is behind sending these texts, but you have zero evidence that suggests Adrianna is behind this. And just because you have people rallying together, mostly Khloe and her parents and that close friend group pointing the finger at her, doesn't mean you have to have this tunnel vision all of a sudden and start grilling Adrianna more than other kids you've interviewed. Like she is the one with no foundational evidence to put behind that claim. Now, I know that there were other people working on this, but let's maybe not come out guns blazing on her without anything to really base it off of. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer, this guy. But guess what, Sheriff? The person you're trying to find sends some more of these texts out. To who? Not Owen and Lauryn, but they send these texts to Adrianna, and these texts are telling her that Owen needs her help and they need to get Lauryn away from Owen. And Adrianna completely breaks down after getting these texts. She's bawling her eyes out. She's terrified. She's traumatized now. It's not her. So now Adrianna's pulled into this harassment. So we go from the parents trying to figure out who this is. Then we go to the principal and the superintendent. They can't figure it out. So now we get the police involved. Well, Sheriff Mike Main at this point has exhausted all of his potential leads. So this starts to become a cold case. Nobody can figure it out. So although the progression in the case slowed, the text didn't, of course not. They came in nonstop. They came in 1 a.m, 3 a.m. And Lauryn's dad, Shawn, expressed in the documentary how much of a strain this situation is putting on their household. Him and Kendra are fighting every night. They start to battle with some serious financial struggles. They're moving from house to house, and poor Lauryn is crying every single morning on her way to school. She doesn't want to go to school because of all this. And Jill notices behavioral changes in Owen, not being able to control his anger. So she takes his phone away completely. I mean, this is a horrific situation, turning worse and worse by the minute with no real end in sight at this point. So finally, there's some hope in this case. Sheriff Mike Main reaches out to the FBI and asks for assistance from their cybercrime unit. This is where stuff really starts to get real. So stay with me. Bradley Peter from the FBI cybercrime unit is now going through the 720 pages of text. Think about how many pages that is. First thing he does, phone extraction of Owen's phone. Is there anything that he can examine that will give him a lead? This is the FBI now. They're not playing around. This extraction includes text messages, pictures, emails, geolocations, but he doesn't find anything linking any of Owen's friends to these texts. So next on the list is looking at the phone number that's sending these messages and finding out the company that owns the number. And this is when he finds the number coming from Pinger, which is one of these apps that people use to disguise their phone number. So he submits a search warrant, and Pinger gives him 2 IP addresses that belong to a Verizon network. So at this point, he submits a search warrant to Verizon to gain more information on these IP addresses and what phone numbers are attached to them. So now we're getting some traction here. He then reaches out to Jill and has her send him over any phone numbers that Owen has on his phone. Friends, family, any phone number. None of these numbers come back as a match to those IP addresses. At this point, Jill is like, okay, what about adults? So Jill basically dumps her contacts and he runs these new numbers, and he finally finds a number that keeps coming up, being connected to those IP addresses at the same time that these texts are being sent. That phone number came back to Lauryn's mom, Kendra. So I'm eating dinner while I'm watching this for the first time. I had myself a little pasta, and I wanted to throw my bowl at the TV because I'm thinking about the nature of those texts, the sexually explicit messages about what this person wanted to do with Owen, a 14-year-old, the absolutely disgusting, degrading things that this person was saying to Lauryn, and it was her mom. I was so filled with disgust and shock. I had to stop watching this. I walked away, and my stomach dropped. How in the world could a mother do this to her own daughter? When the FBI agent discovers this information, he's completely speechless. He has no idea what to say. And he reaches out to Owen's mom and delivers this stunning information. And Jill cannot believe it. Literally, she says in the documentary, "No, it can't be her. She's been helping me." Oh, do you remember that earlier in the video where she's going to the school and bringing all the pages of texts and trying to find out who the cyber stalker is? It's you. It's you. Don't worry, we're going to come back to Kendra. But at this point, the FBI has a meeting with Sheriff Main, and Bradley from the cybercrime unit presents all of this information that he's uncovered and is presenting who he thinks is involved in the case. And he goes through everything with the sheriff, the search warrant results, the thumb drive with all the search warrants on it, his entire report. And Sheriff Main is as shocked as the FBI agent was. And now, 2020 hindsight, he's like, Kendra has interjected herself into the investigation multiple times, asking, where are we with the case? Is there any updates? So they start looking into her past. And remember, she's involved as a coach at the school. She worked the book fair one time. She was the volunteer scorekeeper at the basketball games. And she's always around when the kids are receiving these text messages, right? So we're seeing her make herself available so that she can be close to the kids, have easy access to the kids. Kendra also has an IT background. At this point, they get a search warrant for all of her electronics because at the end of the day, they still had to prove that she was the one on the device that this number was attached to. And it was most likely her, but they still needed that direct connection. So, armed with this search warrant, Sheriff Maine and one of his detectives head to Kendra's residence. And their main objective is to get a recorded confession from her. And so they pull up to the house. Kendra's outside when they pull up, so they head inside to discuss what evidence they have on her. And this is where I had to do some rewatching because initially I was a little confused with the fragmented messaging coming from the sheriff. It didn't seem like he was totally clear and concise when he was talking to Kendra. And they have the upper hand here. They have the evidence that ties one of Kendra's devices to those IP addresses that were sending those messages. They have a search warrant in hand that gives them the will to flip the whole house upside down if they wanted to. And the sheriff even tells her that. So just based off the way he was scattered and with his words and a little jumbled with his messaging, you would think that they didn't really have much on her. So she does start talking and she does admit to not necessarily starting the messages, but continuing them for the past 22 months. And to me, it wasn't an over-the-top confession that the prosecution could then present in court, but it was enough to pursue the charges. And those charges were 2 counts of stalking a minor, 2 counts of communicating with another to commit a crime, and 1 count of obstruction of justice. Now, after getting a call from Lauryn and the sheriff, Shawn, Lauryn's dad, races home from work, and the sheriff drops all of this information onto him. And people were alluding to Shawn and Lauryn possibly being in on this. I don't think so. This was a broken man that I saw when he found out his wife did not have a job, like she told him, was not keeping up with the bills. And in this body cam footage, you can see the distress on his face. He is just in absolute shock. And Lauryn is 15, 16 years old, a teenager. And she's finding out that for the past 2 years, all this degradation and harassment and the horrific, severely damaging comments that were made about her are coming from her own mom. She's not in on it. She isn't not reacting the proper way. She's damaged, shocked, and broken, and she needs serious help and serious therapy for what she had to endure. To me, she looks broken. She has been severely manipulated and held under this torture for so long. And thank God for this FBI agent really making a breakthrough in this case, because the school and the sheriff exhausted all of their resources and they needed that expert set of eyes. I feel terrible for the dad as well because he lost everything. He lost so many possessions, and more importantly, he lost his family. And like I said, he's a broken man, and I know he's going to dedicate the rest of his life to helping Lauryn get the proper therapy and just be there for her so that she can move on with her life and heal the best she can from this horrible, horrible situation. This is just a personal opinion of mine, but I really would have liked to see the sheriff separate Lauryn from Kendra and have Lauryn either wait outside or wait in another room. I just don't think Lauryn should have been there when he was interrogating Kendra, and then even later when he's talking to Shawn about all of this. I just don't think Lauryn should have been there in the middle of that, because Kendra, being the master manipulator that she is, was clinging to Lauryn, and it was sickening to watch this. But the sheriff is basically telling Lauryn, hey, everything you've been going through for the past 2 years is because of your mom. She was the one behind this. And this is prompting Lauryn to be absolutely shocked and stunned and frozen and almost numb to what's going on. And the way Kendra is clinging on to her, it was sickening to watch. And I wanted to pull her away from Lauryn. And I don't understand why the sheriff had Lauryn in there. It's just a personal opinion of mine. But I really would have liked to see her be separated from Kendra during all of this. So following Kendra's arrest, she is charged and she ends up taking a plea deal. And I want to break down the terms of that plea deal just so we have some more understanding of the charges. Licari pleaded guilty to 2 counts of stalking a minor, both of those being 5-year felonies. The prosecution dropped 3 other felony charges against her as part of the agreement. Those charges dropped were 2 counts of using a computer to commit a crime and the 1 count of obstruction of justice. Now, under the deal, Kendra was sentenced to a minimum of 19 months in prison with a maximum of 5 years. And in April 2023, the judge sentenced her to this term minus the time she had already served. And she was released on parole in August 2024 after serving around 16 months. Now, this plea deal had a victim contract restriction as a condition of her supervised release, and she's not permitted to see Lauryn until February 2026. Also in that deal, she is on a no contact order and is not to contact any of the victims involved. And I'm not sure totally if she's able to only contact Lauryn then or any of the victims. I'm not sure if the no contact order is indefinite with Owen and the other victims. If you do know that information, let me know down below in the comments. So all of this leaves us with the last thing that we're going to discuss in this episode, and that is the motive. Why? Why in the world would a mother do this to her own daughter? And I have my own theory, but when I look at this situation in its totality, it's hard to even imagine what she could say to explain this behavior. But she gives several explanations, and she attributes these explanations to past trauma and an impulse to protect and control her daughter. The prosecutor that was a part of the documentary brought up the possibility of this being a cyber-stalking Munchausen syndrome by proxy situation. And Munchausen syndrome by proxy is this form of abuse. More times than not, it's the caretaker of a child, and in most cases, the mother either makes up fake symptoms or causes real symptoms to make it look like the child is sick or ill. And we've seen this in cases, Gypsy Rose's mother and what she did to her daughter. We've also seen this in the Patrina Stalker case. If you're not familiar with that case, she was charged for killing her 9-year-old son by spiking his hospital drip feed bottles with salt. And then she would tamper with his urine samples, his vomit samples, basically in a bid to draw attention to herself. So I can see where that correlation can be drawn here, because Lauryn would be traumatically distressed by this cyber harassment and would confide in her mother and come to her mother for that emotional support during all of this. I don't believe Kendra when she says that she was doing this in an effort to protect her daughter because of how she was traumatized from being assaulted when she was Lauryn's age. Okay, even if that was true, how on earth did you come to this delusional conclusion that by harassing her, degrading her, threatening her, emotionally and mentally abusing her would be the way to protect her? And they even ask her in the documentary, what would you have done if she actually did take her life because of this. And her answer to that question was, oh, she wouldn't do that. I know my daughter. Lady, you were despicable for even saying something like that. And thank God she didn't take her life, because the reality of the situation is most kids that deal with this level of harassment and bullying at her age do end up taking their lives. And it's disgusting that you were willing to roll the dice the way you did. And I almost lost it when she said she was bored. She said she was bored because she didn't have a job. Bored? How about you put the phone down, stop harassing these kids, and get a job? Start paying some of these bills. Bored? Get out of here with that. My goodness. And based on everything that I've observed, and this is just my personal observation, my personal opinion and theory, but I can't help but think that she had some weird attraction to Owen, one that was extremely inappropriate. And I can't help but witness the jealousy and the envy of her daughter that she felt. Her daughter is happy. She finds a nice boy, starts finding herself, and she's starting to thrive in her teenage years. And I can't help but think that Kendra was so committed to living through her daughter that she turned absolutely dark. Those text messages, those messages were so evil. And the calculated nature of them was something so beyond disturbing. Because after Lauryn and Owen break up, she continues this pursuit of Owen and is still talking to him and is still texting him. And knowing that it was her behind those texts just makes you want to vomit. Those texts are disgusting. She definitely seemed to have an overwhelming jealousy of her daughter and her relationship with Owen, almost in a sick way of, if I can't have him, then you can't. And I know Lauryn mentioned hoping to have a relationship with her mom again someday, but who knows if that is a good idea or a bad idea. That will have to be up to a professional to determine. But even when Kendra was in jail, she would still find ways to manipulate Lauryn through emailing her. And it's extremely sad that Lauryn really missed out on this season of life, a season where you're supposed to find yourself and make friends and experience things. And that was all tainted because of her mom. All for her to have this control, this weird, sick control. And on top of that, she brought those other kids into this situation that had nothing to do with it. And once again, yeah, I might go over the speed limit sometimes, but please do not sit there and try to justify your inexcusable behavior, Kendra, by telling me everyone makes mistakes and the only difference between you and I is that you got caught. I don't think so. But that's my takeaway when looking at this case in its entirety. And that is, of course, again, just my personal theory. But what do you think? Leave your theories down in the comments. I'm interested to see what you guys think about what is going on inside of Kendra's mind. Heartbreaking story. I am glad that Shawn has full custody of Lauryn, and I hope these kids in this situation get professional help so that they move on from this situation and continue their lives. They have their entire lives ahead of them. That is all I have for you today. Thank you again for joining me on this episode of Inside the Mind. If you like this video and want to see more of my breakdown on these cases, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. Until next time.